Welcome back, Guiding Bull Gating fans. Jessica here, and today we're diving into part 3 of our combat creation series. With today's video, we're going to put together what we've learned in parts 1 and 2 and start to create some actual battles. The first thing we need to discuss is about designing and drawing out a battle map. When you first begin to sketch out a battle, I want you to be general. Once things come together as a whole and take some shape, then we'll start adding in the details. What do I mean about this? First, forget the graph paper. I want you to sketch everything out with only the notion of how many moves or actions are between items. Most creatures in D&D move about 25 to 30 feet per action. As such, it really only matters that the party starts out 2 moves away from the archers, for example. It'll take them 1 turn using dash to close the distance, and then they won't be able to attack that turn, bonus actions and all that aside. Also, when you're drawing your maps, draw blobs with labels. The creatures will go here, the obstruction there, and so forth. Let's get started building out our first combat. First, we need to start with something. It can be a specific creature or a certain battlefield, or you might already have an actual encounter with a goal question that needs to be resolved with a source of conflict. It doesn't matter where you decide to start, eventually you will end up with all of these things. Let's go back to the concept we mentioned in video 1 of this series, the thugs guarding the entrance to a hideaway that the party needs to infiltrate or rob, or whatever it may be. Maybe the hideaway is positioned at the end of a narrow street, and the group of thugs are loitering around outside the front door. So we've got an encounter with a goal and a source of conflict. Next, we want to pick the monsters. Remember though, we're picking creatures based upon their strategies and what they're capable of. If you don't have something specific in mind yet, pick something that fits the situation. You can always swap them out later. For our combat, this step is easy since we're obviously going to use the thugs. These guys are brutes who are going to prefer direct combat over ranged attacks. They also benefit from being close to allies, so they're going to try to gang up on the PCs. The third step is to put all else aside. Sometimes we have lots of ideas, but we don't want to go overboard. Put all else in reserve until we're ready to use them. In our example, we've got thugs guarding a locked door to a hideaway. We don't really have anything else at this point, so that's simple. Done. Next, we create the concept of the battle. If you don't have a specific battlefield in mind, drop your PCs and creature blobs into the middle of an open space. If you have starting positions, place everyone accordingly. Otherwise, just have the 2 sides oppose one another. In our example, we know we've got a narrow street with the thugs against a building on one end, and the PCs are approaching from the other side. Check! The 5th step is where we take our mock party and blob concepts and play the battle out in our heads. We don't sit to roll the dice round by round, we simply imagine how the scene is likely to play out. In our thug example, the thugs are going to hold their ground outside the door, waiting for the PCs to come to them. The cleric and fighter, remember we're using our mock party, would likely run up to engage the thugs in melee combat. Our rogue would attempt to sneak around behind to assassinate, while our ranger and wizard would stay back to make ranged attacks. Now, after that first run through in our head, it's time to get in the party's way. Remember last video how we discussed that we want to kick them over to their second order strategy to make things more interesting? It's time to figure out what elements will trip up that first order strategy. This could be any number of things, from splitting the monsters up into more than one group, to adding in new creatures, to shifting the terrain to add obstructions or obstacles. Let's take another look at our thug fight. It's not bad, but it could be better, right? In the first run through, both the ranger and the wizard went uncontested. They were free to fire away at range without threat. Let's change that. Let's give a thug or two crossbows. Sure, they'll give up their multi-attack to do so, but now our ranger and wizard will have someone to harass them a little. Next, we want to make our rogue work for his sneak attack, so let's create a choke point for the thugs to hold. Maybe the door to the hideaway is part of a recessed entrance, or there's a guardhouse up front blocking things off. This way, the party will have to lure the thugs out in order to give the rogue space to sneak behind. The fighter and cleric are already running in to face the thugs like we want them to, so we won't mess with that. But we need to be sure the entire party doesn't hang back and try to weaken or eliminate the thugs completely at range. I like the idea of that guard hut. If the thugs are receiving only ranged fire and aren't getting engaged in melee, they'll have a place to hide out to encourage the close range combatants to come forward. After kicking the PCs over to their second order strategy, rerun the battle in your head to see how it plays out. It should be more interesting and exciting now. Be sure to keep an eye out for issues though. Unless specifically planned out, watch for overt victories or sheer slaughter. Also, be watchful for any PCs in your mock party that don't have anything to do. This is okay sometimes because it can add drama and tension, just so long as it doesn't happen every fight and it doesn't happen to the same PC every time. This is the step where most battle builds will end. Your fight should be good enough as it is. But if you want, feel free to occasionally tweak the difficulty up or down from here. Remember, we do not block the second order strategy. What we can do is add things to make their strategies a little more difficult to execute, like giving the monsters a defensive buff or adding in difficult terrain to slow the PCs, but we don't outright block any further strategies. Let's look at our thug battle again. The cleric and fighter will move up while taking fire from the thugs with the crossbows. The thugs with crossbows can either support their melee counterparts or then focus fire on the wizard and ranger at the distance. The rogue might still try to find a way to circle around, or they might decide to stick close to their allies in melee as backup, or even decide it's safer to fight at range with the wizard and ranger until things are a little more under control up front. But let's do a little bit of tweaking since our crossbow guy is kind of weak. Let's make him less vulnerable to melee attackers by giving him some height. We're going to put him up on a balcony on the second story of the hideaway building. Maybe the front of the building has lattice work or vines growing on it, making him still accessible to the melee combatants, but it'll effectively add some distance to give him a little bit more protection. A quick mental check and everything is looking good. Next step is running the numbers through the encounter formula. It should go without saying, but you should know the formula system of the game before you even start this entire process. As you build the battle, you should already have a general sense of the power level of the creatures, so your XP budget should add up pretty decently here. If not, tinker a little bit. Otherwise, we all make mistakes sometimes, and you may just have to scrap things and start all over from the beginning. That's okay. So let's say we have 4 thugs on the ground and 1 crossbow guy up high. That gives us 500 XP. Because we have 5 monsters, we multiply that by 2 to give us an adjusted value of 1000 XP. This would fall between a medium and a hard encounter for a group of 5 3rd level PCs. Once everything checks out, it's finally time to turn your conceptual blob map into an actual combat map. Replace all the blobs with PCs, creatures, and actual terrain that suits whatever setting you're in. Sprinkle some props, and you're ready to go. That was fun. Let's go ahead and build another example. This time I want to start with a monster, the bullywug. I've never built a combat using these humanoid frogs, so I'm looking forward to this one. We know these guys are nasty and brutish, but tend to be cowards. They like to overwhelm opponents with numbers, but will flee if the tides shift and they come under threat. Based on the motivation of advancing among their kind, they're after loot, treasure, and captives to bring back to their king or queen. We would expect ambushes from these guys, and they're looking to capture rather than kill opponents. Next, we put all else aside. At the end of part 2's video, we jotted down some ideas for encounters within our swamp. Our list included bullywugs, swamp gas, vines, giant frogs, and water pits. We've already got bullywugs in a swamp, so let's put everything else in reserve for the moment. Conceptualizing the battle is next. Let's throw our bullywugs and our PCs in a swamp and see how that battle plays out before getting into more detail. The group is walking through the swamp when they come across a group of bullywug. The fighter and cleric are going to form a wall to ensure the bullywugs can't jump over them in order to protect the ranger and the wizard, especially the wizard, who are going to fire ranged attacks themselves. The rogue will likely hang back for ranged attacks until the fighter and the cleric have things under control and he can safely sneak around to murder and assassinate. Okay, time to block. Let's not let the fighter and cleric form a line to control the fight. We already mentioned that the bullywugs are likely to use ambush tactics, so let's set them up in a semicircle to begin with. They'll use their swamp camouflage to blend in to get the jump literally on the party for a surprise round of attack if they successfully go unnoticed. For added flavor, we'll assume one member of the bullywug party is the leader of the band. We'll give him a giant toad mount which can swallow medium or smaller targets. This could be incentive for the rogue to hang back and not separate himself from the party lest he get caught all by his lonesome self and maybe swallowed. Just to be sure, we'll add in some semi-shallow water to make movement more difficult. Since we already know the bullywug are going to have numbers and are going to set up an ambush, I think our squishy wizard is already at a disadvantage, so I'm not going to do anything to block his strategies here. Alright, let's play this fight out again. I think it's starting to look pretty sweet. The party is going to wander right into the bullywug's ambush and get surrounded. Now, if we want, we can have the bullywugs make a little bit of noise to give the party a chance to detect them to prevent a surprise round. So the swamp water will create tight quarters, but the close quarters will give the party a better chance to defend themselves against the large group of bullywugs if they can get themselves maybe up against a copse of tree or something. I'm going to leave the battle as is here, but if you wanted to increase the difficulty, you could make some of the water into deep pools that would cause the PCs to need to swim. You could even set it up as a trap. Have some vegetation covering the water pits, and if a PC steps into it, they immediately splash down into the water. Let's do some quick combat math. If we assume a 5th level party of 5 PCs, then our band of 13 bullywugs and a giant toad would make a medium level battle. I think the setting may add some slight difficulty, but if the party sticks together to prevent members of their team from getting captured and hauled off, then it should be a tense but interesting fight. This battle is looking good, so let's go ahead and finalize the map. Let's go ahead and start creating one more battle together. This time I want to start with a battlefield. I'm thinking a snow-crusted mountain valley with a gathering of tents that house some nomadic families. The little tent village will be under attack by something. Okay, so maybe this is again more like starting out with an encounter and a goal question, but we're going to keep rolling with it nonetheless. Next, we want to determine what sort of creatures might fit into this environment. We could do a pack of wolves, but we've already done a packed animal example with our thugs earlier, so let's pick yetis this time. Yetis are hulking creatures that have an insatiable appetite. They're vicious creatures that are always on the hunt. Okay, So we've got yetis in a snow-crusted mountain valley. Let's move on to conceptualize the battle. We've got PCs coming up on the small group of tents that are being attacked by some yetis. Let's see how this one plays out. Our fighter and cleric will likely try to draw the yetis' attention and engage them in melee. Our rogue is probably going to have difficulty getting behind the raging yetis, so he's going to start helping the nomads escape. Our ranger and wizard will likely lay cover fire if they can safely do so without hitting anyone. Otherwise, the ranger will likely get in close to be backup melee while our wizard will help the rogue. We've already got a lot going on with this scene if the PCs decide to make saving the nomad families a priority, but let's slow them down just a little bit further to increase the tension. We'll have the party come upon the scene from a mountain pass, so they'll see the scene unfolding down below in front of them. In order to join the fray, to engage in melee combat, or to start helping the nomads flee, they'll first have to get down the icy, snow-covered slope. A successful trip down the hill means they'll close the distance and still have their action if they want to attack. A slip on the way down means they'll have to hustle to close the distance instead. If either the ranger or the wizard decides to stay on the ridge for ranged fire, we don't want them to go totally scotch-free here. I think I'm going to play with the yeti's actions. It already gets a multi-attack of Chilling Gaze and 2 claw attacks, so maybe I'll allow it to make a ranged attack, perhaps throw a boulder or an ice chunk, in place of the 2 claw attacks if it wishes. That makes for an interesting choice. If it successfully paralyzes an opponent with its Chilling Gaze, it can then hit the paralyzed foe with 2 claw attacks, or it can attempt to get the ranged attack off its back with a thrown boulder, while the melee opponent is stuck frozen there. Yes, I'm liking all the different options this combat provides. We'll leave the fight looking like this. Looking at the combat map, we can either have 2 yetis for an adjusted XP of 2100 or 3 yetis for 4200. For a group of 5 5th level members, that's either an easy medium battle or a hard deadly one. If you know your players and know they can handle the harder combat, go ahead and throw it their way. Otherwise, I would probably err on the side of caution in choosing the 2 yetis. You could also slightly balance the hard deadly encounter by having a few of the nomad NPCs join the fight against the yetis. Let's clean up our final combat map. And there we have it, 3 battles designed from start to finish. You see, once you get the process down, it's actually quite fun building a combat that's both tense and exciting for your players. That wraps up our videos on how to design and build battles. We'll have one more video next week where we discuss tips for running better battles during an actual session. What did you think of the 3 battles we put together today? I'd love to hear your ideas down below in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. And until next time, enjoy your gaming sessions.